after my sophomore year in college, I had the opportunity to take a year and do something different. In fact, the very first day that I got to college, the university president gathered us all together, said, I want to welcome you to college and ask you to please go away. And what he meant by that was consider taking a year for something else during your college years, and then bring that something else back with you to complete your education. And I took him seriously. And I took a year and I worked on Capitol Hill. And I worked for a member of Congress named Leon Panetta. Leon is now the head of the CIA. At the time, he was a congressman representing 200 miles of the prettiest coastline in California, San Luis Obispo, Carmel by the Sea, the 17-mile drive. And I always teased him that nobody wanted to leave there to go to Washington to work with him to represent their interests. So he had me from Boston, Massachusetts doing that. He had legislation about national service. I was 20 years old, like so many of the young people up here front here. I had never heard of this idea. And I was thunderstruck when I looked at this bill. It talked about that the country should call on America's young people, and I was young at the time myself, and say, give a year or two to your country, and you'll be a multi-billion-dollar service resource, helping the country to solve problems. You'll get trained up as a leader and as an active citizen that could have a lifelong benefit to you and your country. You could help get millions of people involved in service through your inspiration and organization. And you could even help complete the American Civil Rights Movement by helping to get people from all backgrounds working together and build a sense of civic trust that they could go on together to help solve problems in more productive ways. And finally, if that wasn't enough, if you tied life-changing benefits like a year, like access to college, a scholarship, for doing a year or two of service, you could provide access to the American dream and provide a domestic equivalent to the GI Bill so that you could serve both domestically and through the armed services in our country and find a pathway to American mobility. So here I was, 20 years old, with that legislation in front of me, and I called my college roommate, Alan Casey, back at college, and I said, this bill's extraordinary. And he said, yeah, I studied that idea in high school. That would most change the country for the better. And ever since then, I guess since we were 20 years old, we've sort of had this mantra, it's national service or bust. Just an idea that this country would be moved forward so tremendously. So after college and law school, we decided that the best thing we could do would be to start a program that could demonstrate and answer some of the questions on this, like would young people want to serve for very little amounts of money and for long hours? Could they do meaningful work? How would you structure it and organize it? Would people want to bring them into their institutions to serve? What would it cost? And begin to answer the questions. And at the same time, try to get others involved in it and say, this is something that could be done writ large. And that led us to start City Year. And the name reflects the idea that just like young people do a junior year or senior year, we think that they should be offered the opportunity to do a City Year. That just becomes a natural part of growing up in American society. So we've been serving in schools for 20 years. But when we first started, we said yes to lots of different community organizations with lots of missions that wanted to utilize young people. And we sort of said we wanted to be the yeast and the bread of those institutions to bring young people in to grow their missions and their capacities. But a big part of it was always schools. 5 years ago, we decided it would be best to really focus our work, to get better and better at serving in schools. And we created something called our Whole School, Whole Child program. And that's what you saw on the videotape. So we now serve in schools from 7:30 in the morning, before the first children get there, literally greeting them on the schoolhouse steps. That's what these wonderful young people do. Cheering for them when they walk into school, high-fiving them, and then following them into the school, tutoring and mentoring them all day, helping to differentiate instruction, provide a positive school climate, and to stay with them through the after-school hours to provide them with extra learning and enrichment time. And while we were working on that comprehensive approach, Johns Hopkins University, as it said on the tape, came out with this powerful study that found that over 1 million kids are dropping out of high school. It made national headlines here in the Journal Sentinel as well as across the country. And they really were the first study to tally what was really happening in the country. And other studies have shown that if you drop out of high school, you're 3 times more likely to be unemployed or in poor health. You're 8 times more likely to be incarcerated over the course of your lifetime than if you've graduated high school. And you're more likely to make less than $1 million less over the course of your lifetime than if you've graduated college, and $500,000 than if you just graduated high school. So there's huge economic factors here. The study further found that 12% of the high schools are driving 50% of the dropouts. And the news media came out and said those were dropout factories. We don't name call it city year, but it was a powerful term. And literally those same schools in many cases are producing dropouts and have been for the last 30 years, unchanged. So not only is it an economic problem that affects American competitiveness, not only is it a problem for the individuals who drop out that end up largely on a sort of a fast track to an underclass, but because of where those schools are in communities of color, and they haven't changed for so many years, as Arnie Duncan has said, the education crisis in America, especially in these schools, is the #1 civil rights issue of our time. And it's a moral question for the country. And the civil rights movement is not something that sort of ended with the 60s or the 70s, but it's present in our own day with regards to education. This study further found, and this is the good news, and we put this in the video, that you can affect the outcomes of kids that you think are going to not graduate from high school because they begin to identify themselves, literally almost like they're raising their hands and saying, I'm probably not going to graduate. And the reason that we know this is because the studies have shown that if you have high absences, meaning coming to school less than 4 days a week, missing a day a week, being there less than 80% of the time, or you're acting up in school and having poor behavior, or you fail, literally get an F in math or English, if you have one of those off-track indicators in a 6th grade in a high-poverty school, you have less than a 20% chance of graduating 6 years later. Wow. But if you can get to the 10th grade on time and on track, no off-track indicators, same high-poverty schools, you have a 75 to 80% chance of graduating. Terrific. And that difference is critical. So what that study did was it said that we were on the right path by focusing these incredible young people on schools full-time, but it began to give us the inkling that we need to put metrics against it. So that's what we're doing now. We're putting metrics against their work, absences, behaviors, and course performance. So literally, our core members, as we call them, will know how they're doing in terms of whether they're keeping students on track to graduate or getting them back on track. And we think that this is sort of a killer application for youthful idealism in America. If you take all these incredible young people, and there's 25 million Americans between the ages of 17 and 25, and there's a youth unemployment rate of 19%, and it's higher among kids of color, and it's a travesty, really, that we're not doing more as a country right now to invest in America's young people. What we should be saying to every single young person in the country is that for the sort of minimum level that you're willing to work here at a program like City Year, it's really subsistence. If you're willing to do that and work 12, 15 hours a day, as these guys do, we have an opportunity for you to help get young people in school and on track. So we have a number of metrics, but I think the most important metric is that this research has shown that absences, behaviors, and course performance affect what's called the urban graduation pipeline in America. People that are starting in kindergarten or K4 here in Milwaukee and getting all the way to the 12th grade. That's the pipeline. And the idea is we want to keep them moving through it all the way to graduation. And those indicators, research has literally proven, are ways in which they fall off track and then will not graduate. So we've tied our star to those. And we've now piloting across the country how best to get that data. And the idea is that every 2 weeks, City Year core members and teachers and social workers will sit around a table and go over every single child in a grade and how they're doing on their absences, their behaviors, and their course performance. It's essentially a total quality management circle for every single child in the grade. And what did we decide to do 2 weeks ago? And is it working? And if not, what should we do now? It's extraordinary. It's that simple. And in the first place we piloted, where we have our longest results now, was in the Philadelphia school system. So across 3 schools of high-poverty middle schools in Philadelphia, with the children in those schools are at 90 and 95 free and reduced school lunch, which is the marker for poverty in America. We were able to reduce over a 1-year period the number of students that were off track on absences by 52%. Wow. The number of students that were off track on behaviors by 48%. And the number of students that were failing English by 80%. Were no longer failing English. The number of students that were no longer failing math, 83%. Now we were encouraged by that. We actually thought it might be harder to get the academic results than the absences and the behaviors. So we were heartened that what you really want to get is to that academic results. And we just found that if you can surround these children with these extra hands and caring adults, you can actually give them the extra supports they need Schools that are in high poverty communities, no matter how great they are, no matter how many great the teachers are, or the principals, or the administrators, they need extra supports. You have to reduce the ratio of caring adults to kids in a building if you want to make sure that every child succeeds. I think a year of service is probably the best way to start one's career. I think it, and you can talk to these folks here, it opens up so many possibilities. This uniform, as I told them just a few minutes ago, is a passport. You're welcome when you're in service into every part of a community, from the boardrooms to the community centers to the schools, and it opens up sort of a civic capacity, and you gain a civic capital from it that you're probably not going to get, even if you landed a great job in a tough economy. You're going to be able to draw on this experience your whole life. You're going to learn leadership skills. There's just the discipline of getting up really early every single day, and probably staying up too late. We talked about that, getting ready for service. So it's something that you would then draw on as you get to know their peers. Something that I wish that I had had when I was their age, which was self-identified idealists that I'm now involved in with every single day, that you guys can stay together with each other and now through technology the rest of your lives. And there's 13,000 alumni that have come before them that are willing to reach out to core members, and there's another 1,000 across the country that you're all working with. So there's so many different things, and so many people have gotten long-term jobs because of their work in City Year. They've then gone on to become teachers or started their own organizations. So I think it's a great place to start. And if for anyone that really has a vision that one day they want to be involved in sort of world-changing work, I'd say come give a year of service in City Year, and I guarantee you it's a path that you won't regret.